They thought it would be funny to leave me behind. That's what Mason said, joking half-drunk before the car door slammed shut, and the taillights disappeared down the dusty road of a small town just outside Charleston, South Carolina. My husband, Mason, and his two best friends who were visiting college for their annual guys' reunion, left me standing alone in front of a closed ice cream shop with nothing but my wallet and a disbelief so sharp it felt like a slap. It was almost 9 p.m. Southern twilight. It smelled of humidity and fireflies. I couldn't move. I just stood there stunned with the words, "You'll figure it out," Rachel echoing in my head like some twisted mantra. Earlier that evening, I had asked him not to drink so much. That's all. Just a quiet, reasonable request as I watched him down his third bourbon-infused cocktail at the rooftop bar while his friends Pete and Jake encouraged him. They always bring out the worst in him, reminding him of who he was before marriage, before responsibility, before me. "You always have to be in control," Pete said with a laugh, giving me a smug look that screamed, "We don't like you here." When I suggested we go back to the Airbnb, Mason stood up, wobbled a bit, and followed me down the stairs. The sidewalks were quiet. The summer air was stuffy. We fought. Not loud, but crude. The words we wouldn't dare say in broad daylight spilled out under the moonlight like gasoline. And then he said, "You have your phone and your ID, right? Great. You'll figure it out. You always do." Fall engine laughter gone. For a moment, I didn't move. Maybe they were walking around the block. Maybe this was a bad joke, one of those cruel stunts people film for viral content. But as the last twilight deepened into darkness and the gas station on the corner closed its shutters, I knew he wasn't coming back. I checked my phone. No calls, no messages. I called him, straight to voicemail. Again and again I texted, "Where are you? This is not funny. Call me now." Nothing. I called Pete, then Jake. They both went straight to voicemail, and then I saw it. My contact with Mason on my phone now has a blocked icon. My throat was tight with disbelief. This is not just spontaneous cruelty. This has been calculated in advance. I sat down on a bench near a closed pet grooming salon, holding my phone like a lifeline and trying to understand what had just happened. We have been married for 7 years. I sacrificed my design career to support his advancement in a major architectural firm in Boston. I followed him to 3 cities. I even threw a barbecue for Pete and Jake. And now, I was just a joke, the subject of laughter in the back seat of a rental car driving back to their Airbnb, while I sat in the hot sun, blinking back tears. I opened my wallet, $41 in cash, a debit card, a half-empty water bottle, and some Advil, my credit card. Mason had offered to hold them earlier that day while we were at the beach, because I didn't want to carry my entire purse in my little woven purse. I thanked him. The humiliation was deeper than the fear. Finally, I found a small motel called Oak Haven Inn. The night clerk, a bored-looking teenage girl with pink pigtails, took one look at me and didn't ask a question. She gave me the last room, $39.99, no refunds, no frills. The room smelled like old cigarettes and the detergent smelled like lemon. The bed sheets were thin and scratched, and the air conditioner clanged every 3 minutes like a dying motor. But it does lock and has a wall outlet for my phone. I stared at the screen for a long while. Still no words, no calls, no messages. Just be quiet. At 1:14 a.m., I opened Instagram. Mason's account has gone private. Pete's latest story is still out in the open. A blurry video of them drinking whiskey, followed by the caption, "Some girls can't take a joke." I felt the nausea rising before I even entered the bathroom. Bile burned my throat, my eyes, everything. I wasn't just abandoned, I was ridiculed. Removed sleep comes in waves. I dreamed of running barefoot through crowded airports, always chasing Mason's retreat. In the morning, I bought a granola bar and a bottle of water from the motel vending machine with the last $1.50 change I had. I considered calling my parents in Illinois. My dad will be on the next flight. My mother would get very angry, then quietly say, "We never really liked him. Rachel." But that call means telling the truth. It means admitting failure. Instead, I opened Google Maps and searched Olive Ridge Farm, California, a place I once read about. A sustainable olive grove in Northern California hosts seasonal workers. It is run by a retired teacher and her husband, a Marine Corps vet. They pay modest wages, provide lodging and meals, and allow quiet souls a place to breathe again. It's 2,300 miles away. I had no car, no money, no plans. But the idea stuck to my ribs like oatmeal. It feels solid. Reality, like something I can touch. That afternoon, I walked to the Greyhound station. I sold my wedding ring, an ornate 2-carat diamond, surrounded by tiny emeralds for $280 at a pawn shop that smelled like mold and broken dreams. The man behind the counter didn't even ask if I was sure. "It happens more than you think," he muttered, thrusting money into my hand. Tickets to Bakersfield, California, cost $236. It will take 4 days and require 2 transfers, but I bought it without hesitation. When the bus left Charleston, I didn't cry. I don't look back. I watched the damp palm trees cower behind me, watched the night fall, watched strangers shuffle into the plastic chairs next to them and lean their heads against the windows to fall asleep. I held the phone in my arms and turned it off. Mason might be wondering where I am, or maybe he's not, but I wasn't about to tell him where I was going. For the first time in 7 years, I didn't ask permission. The bus ride across America was less a journey than a meditation in discomfort. In 4 days, I learned the delicate ballet of public transportation. Polite nods when exchanging with strangers, the art of napping without missing a stop, and how to ignore the ache in my spine when the seat won't recline. I watched cities turn into fields, fields fade into mountains, and mountains turn into dust. Each stop was a reminder of how far I was from everything I knew. And yet with each passing mile, the weight of Mason's betrayal became lighter, and the further I went, the smaller he became in my mind. When I stepped off the last bus in Bakersfield, my limbs were stiff, my clothes were wrinkled, and my soul was strangely calm. I have done that. Now comes the difficult part. I took a taxi from the station to Olive Ridge Farm, about an hour from the city. The landscape changed as we drove. Flat fields gave way to rolling hills dotted with old oaks and faded olive groves. Modest sign, Olive Ridge Farm, 1981 estimate. As we turned onto the gravel road, the setting sun turned the trees into dark lace against the orange sky. Grace and Henry Carter were waiting on the porch. Grace was in her 60s, supple with curly gray hair that hung like a halo above her head. Henry, tall, stooped but sturdy, wearing a denim shirt with sleeves rolled up to his elbows, his hands the color of a sunburnt earth. Grace stepped forward. "You must be Rachel." I nodded, suddenly embarrassed. "You're skinnier than the email suggested," she said, squinting at me. "But not broken." "That's good. We don't fix people here, just give them space. Come on, let's get you settled in." Mom. My room was in a converted warehouse, simple but clean, with a double bed, a desk, and a single window overlooking the forest. There are no locks, no pretending, just wood linen and quiet. Grace left me a pitcher of water and a folded map of the farm. "Orientation starts promptly at 6 a.m., she said from the doorway. "Breakfast at 5:30. We grow olives, but we also grow something else, purity. See you later." That night, I slept deeper than I had in months. The next morning began with the sound of roosters crowing and the aroma of something delicious coming from the farm kitchen. I wore old jeans and a flannel shirt I bought at Goodwill at a bus stop. My sneakers were still covered in dust from Charleston. Outside, the air is cool and fresh, and the trees stretch out like guardians of another world. We start in the eastern forest. Grace handed me a rake and showed me how to gently scoop the olives onto the wide nets spread under the trees. The work is repetitive, but not meaningless. I fell into rhythm, letting the sound of the falling olives become a kind of mantra. The sun has risen. Sweat poured down. The same goes for the pain in my arm. But there is something else present. I was here. Whole. For lunch, we sat under a shade tree eating bread, cheese, figs, and oil pressed straight from the grove. There are 3 other workers. Miguel, a recent divorcee from New Mexico. Talia, a quiet woman from Seattle who kept a diary on moleskins. And Jonah, a college dropout trying to reconnect with nature. The first day we didn't talk much, but no one asked questions. No one needs to know my past to share this moment. That afternoon, Grace taught me how to sort olives by quality. The perfect ones would be premium oils. She says, rolling one on her palm. Other things still have value, just a different purpose. That line stayed with me. I used to consider myself senior. Sleek, poised, married to a man with a 6-pack and dressed in tailored suits. Now I'm not sure what kind of olive I am, but perhaps the value isn't always where you expect it to be. The days blur into a kind of sacred repetition. Early morning, long work, quiet night. I learned to love the feeling of dirt under my fingernails, the pain that meant I deserved a break. I started cooking dinner on Fridays, simple meals with garden herbs and seasonal vegetables. Grace complimented my sense of flavor balance. Have you ever thought about designing your kitchen instead of just the space? She asked one night. That question changed something in me. Mason always says my design work is cute, a hobby, a luxury. But here my aesthetic eye and need for balance have found new ground to stand on. 2 weeks later, I received an email from a former customer. She heard I was freelancing again and wanted help renovating a historic guest house in Savannah. I stared at the screen for a long while. My fingers hover over the keyboard. After that, I wrote one word again, concerned. The next day, I told Grace Good, she said, not taking her eyes off the pruning, you may have more than one home, Rachel. You may have roots in many places. That night, I watched the stars appear above the forest. The sky is like Boston, like Charleston, like everywhere else. But here, they don't just shine. They talked. And I was finally quiet enough to listen. No one knows where I am. That was the first thing that made me feel safe. The small coastal village in Oregon is off the tourist map with only a few hundred residents and occasional phone reception. I rented an old cabin from a widow named Margie, who still had the habit of drinking strong black coffee every morning and leaving the door unlocked because no one steals jars of homemade jam. I told her I needed a quiet place to rest and write a book, and she didn't ask anything more than the rental price and whether she was allergic to cats. I'm not allergic. I'm not even sure what I'm allergic to anymore after everything I've been through. The cabin is located on a small slope overlooking the winding coastline. In the morning, the sound of waves hitting rocks echoed into my bedroom as a gentle reminder that I was still alive. In the afternoon, sunlight slanted through the rough fabric curtains, making the room warmly golden. I started taking notes again. Not interior designs for luxury apartments in Boston like before, but scraps of thought, feeling dialogues. I never had the courage to say. One Tuesday afternoon, as I was harvesting strawberries from the back garden, Margie called over. "Someone is asking about you in town. A well-dressed man driving a shiny white SUV, asking if there's any stranger renting a room around here." I felt my blood run cold. Gabriel. No need to say the name. The description is too familiar. He really put in the effort to find it. I retreated into the cabin, pulled the curtains, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark, listening to every noise outside the window, like a hunted animal. But then, nothing happened. No knocking sound, no sound of the car stopping. Maybe he hasn't found the right place yet, or perhaps he has found it but doesn't want to reveal it yet. The next day, I went to town wearing a wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses, feeling nervous. I stopped by the grocery store gas station and the only coffee shop in town, pretending to casually inquire, "Did that man say his name? Looks like you're looking for your ex-wife? Sounds like an escape right." Everyone loves a thriller, but no one has specifics. I felt both relieved and uneasy. Gabriel is not the type of person to give up easily. That night, I reopened the laptop that I had forgotten for a long time. Emails are full of spam and notices about missing old jobs. Among them, there was an email from Sally, a former colleague and the only person I ever trusted at the company. "Alexis, I don't know where you are, but Gabriel is telling everyone that you have depression and are being treated at some center. You should know this, and if you need help, I'm still here." I read those words over and over again, my hands shaking. Gabriel not only sought me out, but also controlled the narrative about me. He tried to create the image that I was weak, out of control, in need of saving, while he was the one who left me behind like an unclaimed suitcase. I walked out onto the cabin's porch, looking out at the ocean. The cold wind blew my hair. A thought suddenly occurred to me. If he was controlling the story, then I needed to reclaim the right to tell it. I can't let him define who I am. I pulled out my phone and looked for Sally's email. Type each word slowly. "I'm not depressed. I'm liberated, and I'm going to prove it." I sent it and sat quietly for hours until night dew covered the wooden railing. The next day, I went to the town library and used a public computer to redesign my CV. I don't have a lot of money, but I still have the skills, and most importantly, I have the determination. I registered as a freelancer on a website specializing in interior design. I started taking on small projects, working online, using intermittent Wi-Fi from the cabin. The first coins transferred to my account made me tear up. This is the first time in many years that I have made money without going through Gabriel. That weekend, Margie brought over an apple pie and whispered, "The man from the other day came back. Ask more questions, but I won't say anything. You're safe here." I hugged her for a long time, feeling a kind of warmth from human love that I had long forgotten. One October morning, as I was drying the sheets, Margie called again. "Alexis, there's a letter from the court for you." Thick letter, postmarked from Massachusetts. I opened it, my heart pounding. That's the divorce document that Gabriel filed. In it, he demanded the entire property be divided in half, along with a request to regain custody rights out of concern for his wife's mental health. I stood still, then burst out laughing. Not for fun, but because it feels like it's time to fight back. If he has officially declared war by law, then I will use the law to respond. I pulled out my phone. Call. Sally. "Do you remember the lawyer your sister used to work for?" I asked. "I need someone who knows how to bring the truth to light." I called Lindsay, the attorney Sally recommended, and within a week we were having a Zoom meeting to discuss strategy. Lindsay was not only sharp, but also sharp, and when she read the documents I sent over about the marriage and the text messages and emails from Gabriel, she only said one thing: "I used the same language he used to oppress you." We began drafting a response letter to the court with clear evidence of psychological manipulation, financial manipulation, and angry abandonment. Lindsay didn't offer to respond, just like Gabriel expected. She demanded an agreement to divide assets, including the house in Beacon Hill, that I had designed, the interior of marital support accounts, and attorney's fees. Gabriel did not respond immediately. While quizzing, I continued to strengthen my independence. More and more freelance projects are pouring in. I redesigned a Western-style cafe in town with lots of wood and warm lighting, with detailed instructions for arranging the space. Margie worked as a marketing and advertising consultant. something she never thought she could do. But she clearly wanted to try. One Saturday night, Margie and I sat on the cabin's porch, sipping homemade wine. She asked, "Do you ever still love him?" I stopped. The quiz question hit straight in the chest. But then I answered, "Maybe I used to, but now I only love myself." The news from Lindsay came 2 days later. Gabriel accepted. He also wanted to sue in return for his honor and property. But almost at the same time, he knew that the evidence was not based on excrement. I walked the Oregon coast that afternoon, and for the first time in a long time, didn't think about Gabriel. In my head, there are only new design ideas, a blog to share stories, and sometimes a new beginning. The first time Gabriel left me behind because he wanted me to regret it. This time I left him behind because he wanted me to be free, and that's the most important difference. It all started with an email. Cold subject line, "I know where you are." Laurel's heart sank as she read the last line. "I came to take you home. The flight lands on Thursday." 4 months of living in peace in the village of Petra, washed away by the sun, the wind, and the smell of fresh olive oil, are now overturned like a stoned lake. Gabriel, the husband who abandoned her like lost luggage, is now on his way here. Not because of love, not because of repentance, but for reputation. Because his ego was hurt when a wife he once considered an accessory dared to disappear without saying goodbye. Laurel sat motionless in front of the phone screen. On the porch, Nikos was checking oil barrels in preparation for the first shipment to Athens. Elena is cutting dry bread into thin slices to bake them crispy and eat them with garlic oil. The surroundings remained the same, peaceful, simple, but inside Laurel a storm was brewing. She knew this time she couldn't avoid it, cannot be silent, can't run away like in the past. She walked into the kitchen, placed the phone on the table, the screen still showing the email Gabriel sent. Elena glanced at it, didn't need to read it to understand. She only asked one short question. "Thursday." Laurel nodded. Nikos walked in from outside, wiped his sweat with his sleeve, and stopped when he saw the two women's eyes meet. Elena turned to him and exchanged a few words in Greek. Nikos nodded, then walked straight towards the warehouse where business documents were stored. A few minutes later, he returned, placed a stack of papers on the table, and silently pushed it toward Laurel. "Partnership," Elena said, pointing to Laurel's name next to the Greek text, "business official." She took it and realized that this was a contract to transfer part of the ownership of the olive farm they had prepared in advance, as if they always knew this day would come. Elena pointed at the paper, then pointed at her heart. "You choose," she said, her voice firm, "not him." Thursday arrived in the bright sunshine of the Peloponnese. The whole village seemed to be on holiday, not because of Gabriel's appearance, but because of the first major shipment since Laurel joined the production. But for her today is something bigger, a confrontation that will determine fate. Gabriel arrived in his usual outfit, white silk shirt, ironed khaki pants, designer sunglasses covering his calculating eyes. The rented car stopped right in front of the small yard leading to the farm. Laurel stood ready, not hiding or dodging like before. Elena and Nikos stood silently behind, like two motionless pillars. Gabriel walked down, took off his glasses, looked at her from head to toe, with eyes that couldn't hide his surprise. "Laurel," he said, as if she had just dropped from Mars. "What happened to you?" "Life," she replied simply. "Real life." He smiled faintly and moved closer. "Come on, you've made your point. It's time to go home. Home." Laurel raised her eyebrows. "You mean Boston? Where I'm not allowed to work? Where I'm not allowed to make decisions? Where my credit card is monitored like a teenager's?" Gabriel paused. She continued. You left me in Italy on purpose. You and your close friends thought it was funny. You never came back, and when you reached out, it wasn't to apologize. It was to control the narrative, to save your image." He frowned, about to say something, but Laurel raised her hand to stop him. She pulled an envelope from her pocket, divorce papers signed and notarized. Gabriel was stunned. You're serious. I've never been more serious," she said, her voice even. "I have a business here, a community, a life. Something I built with my hands, with my heart, and without you." Elena walked over and gave Laurel a small bottle of oil. The first batch of products under the new brand, Petra Grove, co-owned by L. Wallace. The symbol is an olive branch surrounding the letter P, an end to a broken marriage and a beginning to something greater. Gabriel took the envelope, anger, disappointment, and panic all showing on his face. "You'll regret this," he said, trying to regain the initiative. "You'll get tired of this fantasy, of dirt and sweat and goats." Laurel smiled, not the ironic smile like before, but a real smile, from the heart. "Maybe. But at least I'll know this life is mine, not one you planned for me." He left the car door slammed shut. The wheel spins in the dust. No goodbyes. Laurel stood there for a long moment, hearing the sound of the car's engine fade away, then fall silent behind the trees. Nico stepped forward and placed his hand on her shoulder. "Now you begin." That day they had dinner in the yard, under an old grape arbor covered with yellow lights. Laurel tells Elena about her new job, remote sustainable interior design. Clients are boutique hotels in Santorini, Mykonos, places she had only dreamed of. Elena smiled and handed her the handkerchief she had just finished sewing, bordered with hand-embroidered olive flowers. Laurel knows life is no longer as simple as before, but now she is no longer alone. She learned to stand on her own self-love, and most importantly, learn to close. A few weeks later, she sent a final email to her lawyer in Boston, confirming the divorce was finalized. That same day, at the village market, she officially signed the new stall sign, Petra Grove Olives and Design. While selling olive oil, we also receive design consultation for those who need a little corner of Greece right in their own kitchen. An old British tourist stopped by, tasted the oil, and asked, "Is this where you live now?" Laurel looked around. The leafless olive trees, the sound of roosters in the distance, Nikos fixing the faucet, Elena teaching the village children how to make pies. She replied softly, "Yes, and where I finally belong." Sometimes the people who try to break you are the ones who set you free. Laurel's story is not only about betrayal, but also about rebirth. About finding strength not in grand gestures, but in small choices, a loaf of homemade bread, a sunrise over an olive tree, the courage to say no more. You don't have to go to Greece to reclaim yourself, but you must stop waiting for permission. Whether it's leaving someone who doesn't see your value, or finally saying yes to the life you've always wanted, your healing begins when you choose friend. If this story stirs something up in your heart, please like and leave a comment about it. Your turning point, and subscribe to the channel to join more women in reclaiming their voice, joy, and lives.